This is Space Cat's Peace Turtles, the unofficial podcast for Fantasy Flight's Twilight Imperium. Episode 95,
Dune Route GenCon Impressions.
Music by Ben Prunty, featuring Matt Martins and Hunter Donaldson.
What are we going to do for episode 100? We're 5 episodes away.
I don't even want you to be bringing it up because that implies that we definitely have to figure out something to do for episode 100.
Well, I mean,
very nervous.
We do, and we have 5 weeks now to figure it out.
Oh, no.
I mean, obviously, I'm being coy, and obviously, we have a grandmaster
definitely
plan.
have a plan, yeah.
Yeah, we definitely have it figured out. It's definitely not going to be like the Mabim Bam 420 thing. Where we skip it. We're totally not going to skip it. We've got a great idea.
Yeah.
Not true. We have no idea at all.
I guess we're taking suggestions.
Do what?
We're taking suggestions? What do people... I don't even know what someone's supposed to do for like a Twilight Imperium episode 100 thing.
Yeah, what
does that even mean?
Is this when we finally do the Twilight Imperium 4th edition review? Where we decide whether we like it or not.
Yes, I think that's exactly what episode 100 is.
That'd be pretty funny if we gave it like a 7.8, like not all the way, just like pretty good.
It's pretty good.
Not best in board, not best in board game, but like pretty good. All right, well we're back in our
homes.
separate homes. I'm sick. I'm very sick. If my energy seems weird, it's because I feel I'm. Really
I want to
dumpy.
say it's the con crud, but you have other theories. But the convention centers will get you. So I feel pretty firm in the belief that the Hunter got by GenCon.
I didn't believe it. There was somebody, I forget. I think it was Necro Firewall. Was like, let's not shake hands. There's con crud out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that seems like an overreaction. I remember thinking to myself. And now I've been like, I haven't been able to move for like 4 days. So like, yeah, maybe
right.
Maybe that's right. Yeah. What are we going to talk about today again? What's this episode?
You know, we banked some stuff at GenCon, and it's stuff we were really excited to do, and I'm really excited to share it. But to kind of give some context to it, we interviewed, the designer, one of the designers, there's 4 of them, but one of the designers of the new Dune edition, and by extension, the original Dune edition. We interviewed Bill Eberle, and we're going to show you our interview with him in a bit, but then we also interviewed Patrick Leader of Leader Games, who are the company that publish Root. So we have 2 interviews with basically the designers of what will be our game 2 and 3, which we're kind of like on the precipice of. And we got to see the games. In some cases, we got to play one of the games. But let's start talking about Dune first, because I think we're going to show that Dune interview first, but we should talk a little bit about what we learned about Dune at GenCon and what we expect from it and everything.
Yeah, well, so we should go ahead and get it out of the way. We did not actually get to play Dune, which is kind of a bummer. It really just came down to scheduling. We had a lot of things we were trying to accomplish at GenCon.
Yeah.
And honestly, Dune, they did not have a whole lot of copies there at the convention.
And it was a hot item.
Yeah, and it was getting, like, we could have, the first day, I think we saw it and got cocky. We were there and we saw like, oh, there's like not that many people playing it right now, so we can probably play it whenever we want. That was not the case, and the fact that we missed it on the first day basically means we did not get another shot at it.
Yeah.
But we did get to interview Bill, which is great. We did watch a lot of people playing it. Me and Matt at one point just stood there for like an hour and just watched people play the demo.
They were only even demoing, in the convention center hall, they were only demoing like the first round or two, and then you had to have ticketed event tickets to go play a full game of it. So we hung around the demo center, so we saw the first couple rounds playing. But if you know anything about Dune, you know that it's a little bit different structurally than like Twilight Imperium or something. So even seeing the first 2 rounds, you kind of get a pretty good sense of like all of the things that can go on within a game.
Right, right. I was kind of struck by it. It really felt very similar to Rex. I mean, I like this might be kind of obvious to some of you, but for me, I didn't know really what to expect as far as like, because this is technically the first time I've played Dune, right? Like I've never experienced Dune. I've only experienced Rex, but I was kind of struck by like, wow, this is very, very similar. And whatever changes they have made to this new edition, I did not detect them in watching people play very, very closely. So they, and also the impression that you might get even from the interview is that this new edition is more of a like cleaning up and less of a like, you know, it's not a bold new version, basically.
Right. If anything, it's almost more than anything, it seems like it's just a celebration of like, we got the license back. We have to print we got to get a new copy out there because the Herbert estate let us do it. So we absolutely, you know, with the movie coming out, there's kind of this added buzz building up, and so clearly the Herbert estate is kind of opening up their doors a little bit. So this is just a jumped opportunity to get it back in the hands of people. I mean, a lot of people can't get a hold of Dune anymore because the second edition is quite a lot older game. It's exciting just that it's going to become a thing that is at many people's tables again, which is a big reason why we want to get into it. Is it's kind of like this game that has a long-standing strategy where there are definitely experts, but there will be a ton of new faces being brought to it. So it's this like kind of perfect marriage of, I think, what we as a show like to do, and that's why I'm excited to start digging into it. Is we'll be a little bit fresh faces with everybody else despite having played a few games of Rex, but we are by no means experts at even Rex.
Right. No, we're definitely not. I mean, I am definitely not, for sure. I feel like I only played Rex a small number of times.
Yeah.
So it, like, even in watching people play it, I could tell like, oh, I even remembered like which house in Dune corresponded to which Twilight Imperium faction, which was good. I thought I actually might kind of forget how all of that spaces out, because there's some weird ones, like the Bene Gesserit being the turtles doesn't really quite doesn't quite sit in my head.
Especially, because you have an actual familiarity with Dune. I'm actually in the process of reading Dune. Well, listening. I listen to audiobooks, but I've been listening to Dune recently, so I'm catching up on the Dune bandwagon. But you've read Dune before, so you have this familiarity with what the factions are. So for you, translating the Bene Gesserit to the Xcha, and you know, all the other, like, hearkening to the Barony of Letnev, those seem like maybe more difficult shifts to make for your lore knowledge.
Right. Yeah, I think the ability for the Bene Gesserit to predict the winner, like, and then win instead, that makes so much more sense for them than it does the turtles in Twilight Imperium. That was one thing I kind of took away from it. What do you think about the game aesthetically? Because I really love the board a lot. I think I actually like the art and everything, and don't attack me here, but I kind of like the look of it a lot better than Rex, actually. Yeah. I never really liked the cover of Rex. Like, there was just something about the box that didn't really... It
feels like a cult remake of TI or something. Like, it just feels like this weird kind of side project, which it is. But yeah, Dune, the art style and everything that they've got is interesting. I think there's a lot of history to it, actually. I think the artist that they have that did, like, the character art and stuff is a, like, well-known, revered Dune artist. You know, it's almost like the Lord of the Rings movies hiring famous Lord of the Rings artists to do their conceptual art. I think this is a similar story with a lot of the art that's going into this Dune edition. Yeah. Which is cool. I do like it. I've heard some people say they're not like super hot on it, but I think it totally depends on how you feel about characterizations. It's not realistic, right? Like these the characters are cartoon characters basically in the artwork, and then the planet itself has this very realistic feel, but it is kind of towing a line between representation and like trying to be an actuality or whatever, you know, trying to be realistic. So I appreciate that, but I think some people it might rub the wrong way for someone who wanted like a really authentic Dune release. I think there's maybe who knows, if the movie comes out and they own this license, I don't know if there's anything that stops them from doing another reprint that is like just, okay, well, here's Timothée Chalamet and he's just going to be on your box art now.
I don't like that. I don't like it when
I don't either.
That.
I think that's kind of a likely scenario, and if you don't dig the cartoon art, I guess you can look forward to that. But the argument
I like the cartoon art. I did I feel like we did hear some people. Yeah, you're right. We did kind of hear some people at Gen Con talking down on the aesthetics of the game. But I want to point out they had these mats that they were laying down that I didn't really care for that much. And I think the mats were kind of taking they would lay this mat down, they would lay the board down. That's like how every game in Gen Con is presented. They have this mat that you'll never really use, and it'll just be like a little like a poster, really. Yeah. They just have laid out across the table. And I just felt like the Dune one wasn't very good, but the board and the pieces, I stand by those. I really like those. And that's what you're going to get in the box anyway. So you're not getting
the way it's going to actually look on your table is probably better than what it's going to look like at Gen Con, just because of all of that going into it. Well, so Hunter, talk to me a little bit about what you think, what you think strategically going into Dune. Like, where's your head at right now with how to translate
structurally
things?
So structurally I feel like Root maybe had not to get ahead of the conversation, but I feel like Root has a little more in common with Twilight Imperium as far as what a game can look like. Yeah. Because they're both based on a victory point system. And it's a victory point system that's kind of a tall order, right? Yeah. Obviously, Twilight Imperium's is much taller than Root's. And in fact, Twilight Imperium doesn't even allow you to win until a specific time, right? I mean, it's mathematically impossible for anyone to win until you cross a certain threshold. In Dune, that is not true. Right. And so structurally, I think it'll be a very different beast for us to tackle with the show. And I'm excited by that challenge. Yeah, but definitely. I did not remember that about Dune. Or I remembered it, but I didn't really feel it until we were watching people play it. And I was like, oh, yeah, this game has a completely different pace than Twilight Imperium does. Twilight Imperium has such a more deliberate pace, whereas Dune... I mean, the victory conditions are, I don't want to say lax, but they are, because it's difficult to do. It's definitely difficult to win a game of Dune. Right. It's definitely not an easy game.
But it fluctuates.
Yeah.
Way more than, you can't lose your victory points so you're always making progress in TI and Root. Whereas Dune, you can make some progress and then lose all of that progress and have to reset from nothing.
The fact that you could basically almost do it and then actually destroy your whole game in a round and then have another shot basically in the next round. Right. That's kind of wild. That's very different from Twilight Imperium.
Yeah. And I'm just excited to see how we talk about factions and how we talk about win conditions when it comes to, like, it's way more about big plays, right? Like in TI, we talk about have a swing round. You got to do things like that. But at the end of the day, it's all about that incremental growth. Whereas in Dune, it's about, like, we have to develop these strategies where it's like, let's set up a situation where we can then swing our opportunity into victory. And who can we ally with? That's a whole other thing too we haven't talked about. But like Dune, you can have an ally. You can have a 2-person victory. So that's a completely different dynamic that we're going to have to learn how to, there's going to be good combos. There's going to be like, oh, Harkonnen pairs best with this. If you want to do an allied victory, try to get this person's alliance or whatever. Yeah. Like that will be a thing we have to talk about.
That's what's interesting about alliances whenever they're built into a strategy game is I always wonder if there is a balance consideration. Right. Like if I'm not saying I like feel like this might be the case with Dune. That's always my question, is if alliances are included in the strategy game, is that maybe because some of the factions are just straight up not as good, so they should ally together? Like, are there certain factions that like shouldn't really, or like it would be kind of overkill if they did? So I wonder, that's going to be, even just right there, that's kind of mind blowing as far as like how much how much work we have to do. And
Yeah.
I want to go ahead and throw this down because I feel like we haven't really contextualized this enough. I feel like what you're actually going to get out of us as far as Dune and Root is the equivalent of the first round strategy guides.
Yeah,
where
definitely.
they're and maybe even more first glance type stuff.
Yeah.
And then if we do all that and then we're like, okay, that was all really good, then we'll get really deep into it. You know what I
definitely.
mean?
Yeah,
like I don't want people to think that we're going to come into this new game and just do everything perfect, basically.
Yeah.
We're going to try and do all that work to make it easier for people who don't know how to play the game and get into some basic strategy that even dumb people like me and Matt can figure out.
Yeah.
But they are definitely not going to be encyclopedias.
Well, and the bigger thing too is it's a part of that. It's all about the community effort, right? It's the same thing that happened early on in this show, which is like we learned things alongside the community. We didn't learn things on our own. It was like that's why this show has errata. It's we hear from you and we go, oh dang, you're totally right. We're dead wrong. Let's reincorporate that idea, and that teaches us, and then our future episodes are more intelligent because of it. So we will 100% be looking for feedback on all of these early episodes for each game, because there's going to be experts in the field that will be able to call us out on bad plans and bad strategy.
Right. That's definitely going to happen, and I look forward to it. Do we want to give him this interview? I'm really excited for people to hear this interview. I'm proud of both of these interviews, but I just got to say, this one really, I don't know if you can hear it in the interview itself, but we were like kind of blown away by Bill here.
Yeah.
So
he's a legend, and it's intimidating to be around a legend, even though he's super not an intimidating guy at all. And you might hear it in this, but Bill Eberle and his co-designers also designed Cosmic Encounter, and he mentions that in the interview. And I've told Hunter that before, but he relearns that in the process of this interview. So you might hear a bit of a startle in his voice when he brings that up, because that's one of Hunter's favorite games. And so just to be like talking with this guy who's kind of like one of the greatest living board game designers is pretty cool and was very exciting. And to hear him talk about it is pretty cool.
Yeah, that was that's very true. I totally forgot that you had told me that, because that just completely blew me away. Here, let's get right into it. Here's the interview right here. So I want to ask you right off the bat that we're here with Bill. How do you say your last name? I'm sorry.
It's Eberle.
Eberle. We're here with Bill Eberle, and I want to ask, how does it feel to be designing Dune again at this point in 2019?
Well, it's not designing Dune again. It's resurrecting
Okay.
the Dune that, in fact, had never died because the fans kept it alive.
Right.
And including this artist who, for the fans, did all this wonderful art, and now it's going to be out
Right.
with all that great art. So it's great. What we had to do is fix things that weren't quite the way they should have been, and make the rules better and more easily understood, and take optional rules and advanced rules and say, no, let's make that one thing advanced.
Right.
And go through, really get all the language right, doing as good a job as we possibly could do. So that was the work. So it's not redesigning.
Right.
The design works.
So it's a lot of like you're cleaning up, you're bringing things together, and
Editing and thinking and thinking and editing.
very good, very good. What would you say about Dune the game? Like, I mean, it has such a legacy to it, but let's say, we have a lot of listeners, I'm sure, that have never heard of Dune, don't know what's up with this game. They all love strategy games though. So what would you say to someone who's never played Dune before about why should they play this game?
Well, the one thing I would say is if you haven't read the book, read the book. Because this game is an exercise of people who love the book and wanted to create a game that was as good as the book. So that inspired us, and also that made you feel like some of the same things that we felt when we were reading it, and the characters that we loved or hated or who surprised us, because that book surprised us. So that's an exercise in how do you take a book and make a game about it. And it's not an easy thing to do.
Right.
And we did our best.
Yeah.
So I'd want them to know first that that's why the game got created. The other is that it works. The characters are all, the mechanics of the game recreate the situations of the different main houses and factions in the book. So if you're playing the Fremen, you'll feel what it would have been like to be in that universe of that book as a Fremen. Or the Harkonnen. If you're the Harkonnen, you're going to be gloating, like the Baron was, more often than not, about his wonderful plan that was going just the way he had hoped it. And if you're the Emperor, you will be lulled into a sense of security because all this money's coming your way and things seem to be, well, like, how could you not win?
Right.
I mean, you're the Emperor, and if you're the guild controlling shipping, you definitely feel like you're superior to these other beings, because you have a flexibility that they don't have in movement. If you're the Bene Gesserit, you'll be experiencing some of the same things that if you were that in the book and in that world, well, you're going to be able to do some of that in the game. Ditto if you're the treaties. So we're trying to make you feel like you're living in that book. Only you're playing a game that will immerse you.
That's I like all the emphasis on like thematic, like making you feel like you are playing as each of these houses or each of these players in Dune the book. If we could get on the more like mechanical side, what's something about this edition of Dune that when you were talking about like, you know, kind of cleaning up certain things, what's something about this edition that you specifically were like, oh, we got to go in and do this or change this tweak this slightly?
Gale Force 9 wanted to put everything in to make the game play better. And over the years, fans have actually said, well, this would help, this would help, this would help. And so we were able to do that. So this game, you have the components and the cards that you're not writing on paper like the Avalon Hill. It's a different experience because we put everything in there to make it easy for you to play the game.
In your opinion, what about Dune has made it last as long? I mean, there's a lot of really great strategy games out there that have kind of come and gone or haven't even had as many additions as Dune. What is it about Dune that is making it so that we are still playing it today?
I mean, we started with Cosmic Encounter, and we wanted a game that you would play and play again and play again and play again. And the strategy is very simple. Every time you play, you can be different. And then there'll be different elements in it, and it's a different game. Well, that concept got kind of invented in that game. Obviously, when we do Dune, it's the same concept. It's going to be different depending on who you play and which factions are in the game, and also which of your friends are who. You know, because your friend is going to be a different kind of the Harkonnen are going to bring something out of them that the Atreides won't, but the Atreides will bring something out of your friend that, you know, so people become different when they're playing because they're almost forced to be by the realities. I mean, we like people to face realities because that's when you really start using your noggin. You know, you're in an impossible situation where that's when you start to think. And I think that's what makes the game replayable because you've had these different kinds of experiences with this one game. And that's if a game isn't replayable, it's not something we will ever try to get published. I think all of our games have that in common. I mean, Cosmic Encounter and Dune we really achieved that in a wonderful way. But we've got a lot of other games too, and they achieve it. Dune just was the right combination of, we were so reverent about the book that it got the best of us. I mean, our best is in that game. The best we could do as game designers. We were irreverent young men who didn't believe in, we didn't trust the establishment, and we were wanting to make games that kind of threw that up and gave you a different world that you made.
I got a personal kind of follow up for that. Like, who, when you're going to play Dune next, who are you most looking forward to playing as? Which house is it that you want to sit as right now? You'll just play any.
I don't play games to win.
Okay.
I play games to have experiences.
So it's what? It's like dependent on your mood, maybe? Maybe you'll be in a mood to be, maybe you'll be angry?
I kind of like to do it at random.
Yeah.
So that's my preference.
So it's like the game kind of tells you what experience you're going to have.
Yeah. And it's like I trust fate to have an experience. And so for me, it's having it be random is fine. Yeah. And some days you're rich, some days you're poor. That's the way life is. And I don't mind that.
That's great. That's great. Well, this was really, really good, Bill. Thank you so much for sitting down with us. We're really looking forward to getting our hands on the game, and we're probably going to be talking about it for quite a while at this point.
We have a lot of great experiences playing it.
Oh, yeah. Well, we most certainly will. We most certainly will.
I mean, games are the people that are playing them, and I like creating games that do that, allow people to be more of themselves, and that's what board games do. They allow you to be people you've never been, and you find things in yourself. That's what board games are, and that's why we created Cosmic Encounter. That's why we created Dune. We're lucky. Lucky that there were, three of us that could care enough about each other and about what we were doing to put up with each other and argue all of the arguments that we ever had about this or that thing being the right thing, and all make it finally fit a game.
You just blew my mind, Bill. That was great. That was, I don't even know what to say. That was what you like. I'm gonna cry talking about this board game right now. You care about this, Bill.
Yeah, of course.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for talking with us, even for a short while here. This was awesome.
Have people want to, talk to me.
Yeah. All right, that's perfect. All right, thank you.
Well, Hunter, I hope you had a couple weeks now, or about a week, to compose yourself after that. You ended there with quite a lot of just intensity, and you were ready to just kiss the man. So.
Hey, no, he was the intense one.
Right.
All right. I was blown away by his passion and his dedication. He was like that scene in that scene in Lord of the Rings where Gandalf is talking to Frodo and he gets all big all of a sudden and the room gets dark. Yeah. The don't tempt me, Frodo moment. Yeah. That's kind of what
Bilbo.
It felt like. It was everything. Oh, it is Bilbo. Yeah, it's not Frodo. Yeah, I'm embarrassed actually even thinking about people listening to that interview now. And yeah.
Well, let's change gears then, and let's talk a little about Root, because Root's something that's been out for a while. Lots of people have been playing it.
But we actually got to play a lot of Root.
Yes, we did, and I've been playing a bit more of it because the whole thing with Dune is we don't have copies yet. They're supposed to ship August 24th. We're hoping to get ours sooner. They said people at GenCon were going to get their copies earlier. We'll see if that's true. But Dune doesn't ship out till August 24th, which means we don't expect to maybe even have it till as late as October if they stick to their schedule. Right. So that could be really tricky. Root is something we have our hands on right now. We got it and its first expansion, and I've played one time with the first expansion, but mostly we've been trying to dedicate our time to learning the base game. But they were there also talking about their upcoming Underworld expansion, so the second expansion for Root. So in a minute, we'll talk to Patrick Leader of Leader Games. But let's talk kind of about what the show is going to do when we get to Dune Root. Now, of course, we're going to do Dune first, but since we're getting games in a Root, I think we already have a much better idea of like what kind of a beast we're tackling with Root.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing is, you mentioned it earlier, but Root has much more of a structure like TI. And I think people are going to be surprised to hear us say that, because Root in many ways definitely is not TI. But I think the point we get at when we say it has a similar structure is just to say that there is an early game, a mid game, and a late game. You build yourself up. You have incremental points that you score. So in that way, those types of conversations will be similar to TI of like, okay, this is what you do in your early game. This is what you do in your mid game. This is what you do in your late game.
It has similar like inertia to
Right.
Twilight Imperium,
Right.
even if it doesn't play anything like it.
But all that being said, the asymmetry of Root is way more extreme than Twilight Imperium. And that's where things are going to be very, very different for us, is talking about, really, it's not even enough to like have an episode that's like a Marquise de Cat guide. It's like you kind of have to have a few episodes about that, because Marquise de Cat is playing a completely different game than the Eerie or anything else. So I don't know exactly what we'll structure it like, but in general, I mean, obviously, the only way you can approach this game is from a faction-based perspective, because that's the only way to play the game, is with one specific faction's goals in mind.
I would imagine it's probably going to be, if I had to decide right this second, that it will basically be like a tutorial episode and then like a basic strategy stuff episode.
Right.
But yeah,
Well,
I liked Root. Root really like charmed me over this trip.
It's been winning me over a
dumb.
lot.
I think it's really dumb that we hadn't just already played it before anyways.
Yeah.
One funny little tidbit I just want to throw out. If you guys listened to the last episode, the live episode with Stephen Wilbur, our guest, who was a fellow Portland comedian, that guy is so picky about board games just in general. And he definitely doesn't like strategy games. I tried to get him to play Twilight Imperium, and he looked at it and was like, this is disgusting.
Yeah.
He loves Root.
Yeah.
Like he can't.
He may have been the most addicted
Root.
to it.
Yeah, he's more into it than I am. He's like wanting to play it basically all the time. He just loves the Vagabond though.
Yeah.
And that's what I think. That's one thing that I think is really cool about Root, is that I can totally see someone just kind of being like, yeah, I like Root, but when I say I like Root, I just mean I like to play this one role, and that's basically it. That's my role,
and that's
what I
totally
like to play.
okay, because that's the thing, is the factions are so different that you are going to like that game. You know what I mean?
Right.
Vagabond Root is a different game than Eerie. You like it in the context, so you're going to play Root. But like myself, I've been playing just the Eerie. We're kind of already gearing up for these guys. So you've been playing a lot of Marquise de Cat, and I've been playing the Eerie. And just like tackling the Eerie has been crazy for me, but it's so interesting to see that like maybe the Eerie is a bad faction for me and how I am in games, and I look forward to how things might change when we approach something like the Otters, which are the River Folk company from the first expansion.
Right.
That's something where it's like, oh man, I might actually be able to play that faction, but because I'm digging into this other one, it's just so interesting how the different games that you even have access to will drastically change. And I think that's going to reflect itself in what our guides, or whatever you want to call them, eventually look like. What episodes about Root look like is going to be dependent on that.
Yeah, I actually think there might be a pretty good case for the different factions in Root are not so much like, it's not like, oh, you're a master Root player because you can play all the factions.
No.
It's like the factions are sort of like, I don't know, they're like your astrology sign or something. They like go with the type of player that you are.
Yeah.
So if you're just like if you're just matched up incorrectly with the faction that you're playing, then you're just not necessarily going to have the best time. That's just my take on it right now, though.
Yeah.
But
well,
yeah,
and thinking about like high strategy for Root and like tournaments and stuff, I was thinking about like there's been some tournaments for Root, but in my mind, I would really want there to be like a tournament where like you're only beholden to one faction. Like you're gonna go to this tournament and you're gonna play the Eerie. in
Ooh,
every
that's
game.
an interesting idea.
I don't know how you structure that, but like that's how I think about this game differently. Is like I want to see the best Eerie player in the world, and I want to see the best Woodland Alliance player in the world.
Gotta be
and
a
I want to see them match
nightmare
up.
trying to like the behind the scenes work for that tournament. Oh, but you've spoken it into existence now, Matt. You know we're gonna have to do that.
Yeah, it scares me to think about that. But I will say we are definitely going to start with just the base game, just because that's like the easiest thing to get access to for people. But in no way are we intending on stopping there, because for me, the base game really feels very locked in to what strategies are available. I mean, if you're always going to play 4-player games, the base game's always going to be the same setup. I mean, yeah, you get to choose like a different starting location kind of, but beyond that, it's like the Eerie will always interact with the Marquise in the same-ish way, with the Woodland Alliance and the like that. Those 4 factions relationships are always the same. The second you introduce even a single expansion into the mix, what I felt just the other day when we played it is every single thing changes, and it becomes a much more, to me, interesting game. I think it's very interesting in the base game, but if anything, it's a little bit more of a math problem to be solved in the base game. Whereas the expansions open it up to like, oh, now we're getting into like this sort of meta text or this metagame stuff that we just have to figure out on a case by case basis.
Can I push back on that a little bit, because I think the reason that you feel that way so strong with it, I think you've got a case here. I think what you're saying makes sense, but I think the reason that you feel that way is because you're playing as the Eerie.
Yeah.
And I'm playing as the Cat, so I basically feel the exact same way too.
Right.
But I just know from seeing Steven's joy in playing the Vagabond, and also just seeing how the Woodland Alliance functions, they both have a lot more randomness built into it, or a lot more like things that can just kind of go different directions.
Right.
And I think because we focused on the 2 kind of big, mathy, meaty ones first,
Right.
I think that's why in the base game it feels a little bit like, oh, this is not shaken up that much.
Yeah.
But I also just feel like your experience of trying to learn the Eerie has been kind of
I've been
fraught.
beating my head against the wall, so yeah, I'm very just kind of like stubbornly trying to figure out how to even compute this game, because the Eerie has been challenging me quite a lot. And I'm finally getting somewhere where I'm like, oh, I think I'm actually learning this. And if anything, that experience is like the biggest thing I want to be able to solve for newer players, which is like I think Root has a really difficult learning curve in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Like just even processing what your faction is supposed to do in relation to the other ones, that's like the hardest part. And if we are able to construct some beginner's guides that just get people to understand really what they should be doing and the context that surrounds that, that will be my biggest triumph with this game, is if we can just communicate that, because that's, for me, been the hardest part, is just learning and understanding those relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing that is fundamentally different about Root, and I think it's what you kind of blew my mind earlier with the tournament comment. I would not feel like it would be fair to like make someone play a Root faction that they did not want to play.
Right.
Like, and I don't feel that way. Like, if I'm playing Twilight Imperium with someone and like they just get like we decide to do like random draw or something, they get a faction they don't like.
Yeah.
Well, too bad. You got to play.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, my attitude isn't really like, oh, there's no way I would ever let you. I mean, like,
right. They're not going to be
that.
that different at the end of the day. Like,
Right.
You're still playing TI.
Like, you know how to play one faction of Twilight Imperium, then you understand the basics of playing them all. But if you don't know how to play a Root faction, then you just don't know how to play it at all. Like,
Right.
and it's going to be a freaking headache to have you play that faction, basically.
Right. Yeah, especially because of how much they all rely on each other. So far, my experience has been, to me, it's starting to feel like the game is more about recognizing who's getting their feet, who's getting the ground beneath them, and you have to stop them. It's going to be so much more about point denial than it is about like scoring your own points. Like, you should always be scoring your own points, but you definitely need to stop the people who are starting to get a leg up, and you need to stop them as a table, as a board. You know, once one person, I think it's a much more difficult game. In terms of like comeback mechanics. And this is something we talked a little bit about Patrick that you're going to hear, but it's not like a primary consideration for them to have like big comeback mechanics. To have big comeback mechanics, you need like big things of randomness, and they're leaving a lot of that out. So your like we have been kind of keep saying, your inertia, like your progress sticks with you. And if you build a really good engine that's working well, it might be too late for other players to stop you. So that early game and that mid game are really all about making sure nobody else finds their footing.
Right.
And that's what kind of that, because you need to know what everybody else is capable of. It's just really hard to communicate that when you don't even know like how the Woodland Alliance works and what is good.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and then like I mean I was about to say the exact same thing about the Vagabond, because like I fail to understand when the Vagabond has reached a point of being very good.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I'll just look over and be like, oh my god, the Vagabond only needs 8 points more to win. How
Right.
did that?
We watched
what happened.
We played a game a couple days ago, and EJ was playing the Vagabond, and someone else was playing the Lizard Cult. And the Lizard Cult was kind of doing well all game, and none of us really, because none of us had played with the Lizard Cult before, we didn't even know what to expect. But then suddenly we all looked over at EJ, and like EJ had a lead all game, but it's one of those like, oh yeah, you're up by 1 point, whatever. And then suddenly EJ was just like, oh, I'm definitely winning the game like this round, and you're just all done. And we look over at his board, and it's like, oh, I guess that's what really, really good Vagabond looks like. I didn't know that until this point.
Yeah, we're definitely still very much babies when it comes to Root. Where I just don't even know what I'm. Well, what me and Paul played that game the other night where Paul messed up the rules and won the game
by like a landslide, but it's because he was scoring very wrong.
But I didn't know that he was doing that incorrectly.
Exactly.
Everything, I think a part of it too is everything happens so separately. You know, it's all happening on your sheet, and then it's happening on their sheet. So if somebody's doing something wrong on their sheet, I have no idea.
I see is
I'm not
board
checking
presence.
that.
Yeah, and that's part of the game. That's what we're learning about the game. Is like, oh, I guess we have to be keeping a very close eye on people's sheets. So I'm excited
it'll be
to
a
see where it
fun
all
game
goes.
to have a moderator for. I think very, very much so. Every game
that's
could use
exciting.
a moderator actually, so that's fine.
Well, I think it's time to jump to our interview with Patrick. I loved this talk with Patrick because he's just a hilarious dude. Like he's
very
really,
cool guy.
really cool and fun to talk to. And the Leader Games team has been like really responsive just in general to us. They're an incredibly nice group of people. I've reached out to Cole, the designer, before, and he was really responsive. And I think the thing that excites me the most about Root is that we're going into it with a company that seems like they want to work with us, which is very, very fun. And that's not a promise or anything, but I'm just saying they're a really cool bunch that I think will be able to get more interviews with them and be able to kind of get more designer notes. And they like to talk strategy. You know, they designed this game with the intent of it being a strategy game, which is different than you may have just heard in the Dune interview, where it's like, yeah, he wanted to design a strategy game, but he wanted to design a Dune game. And that was the focus. This game is more about like, I want an asymmetrical strategy game, and the theme is there, but it is mostly about like, how do these factions interact with each other? So I'm really pumped to just continue being able to talk about that with them. So without further ado, let's talk about it with them, with Patrick Leader. We are here with Patrick Leader of Leader Games, the producers, distributors, kind of everything of Root, right? So Hunter and I, have not played Root yet. So we're coming in pretty blind, but our fans are dying for us to start digging into this. And we are also dying because we've been addicted to the art ever since we first heard about it last year or before. So I guess the first thing we kind of want to do is have you give us that like typical pitch of just like what is Root and why are our fans so engaged with us doing that?
So first of all, let me promote on September 21st, we're having an art show for Kyle Farron in the Twin Cities. So we're taking over gallery and we're doing like 80 of his prints up in the gallery. It'll be 30 or 40 Root prints. So if you're excited about the art, come on down. Yeah, we haven't officially announced it yet. Anyway, so I will explain Root to you now. So Root is our 2 to 4 player asymmetric area control game. So much like Twilight Imperium, where you're moving ships into an area to control it, in Root, there's only one thing, warriors, and you're moving warriors into clearings to control them for whatever reason. It's asymmetric, and so you have everybody's kind of doing that for a different reason. So there is the cat who is recently conquered the woods. She is from a rural group of like a rural empire, and she's moved into the woods with her cat warriors. and she's just there to build infrastructure. So she's building sawmills, she's building recruiters, she's building crafters, and she gets points if she does that with the wood that she gets from the forest. So she's a job creator, right? You know, the birds, the old area of birds has come back to the forest to reconquer it from the cats. And so they have a huge military presence at the start of the game, and they can blow up from there. The Erie has to make a decree every turn. So they say, this turn, we're going to attack in a red clearing. And so they do that by putting a card into their decree, and they have to follow their decree exactly every turn. If they miss a step of their decree, their government falls apart, they assassinate that leader, and a new leader takes over, and they have to start a new decree with the new government. There is an art to doing it. Sometimes you want to crash a little bit in the early game to kind of reset a little bit after you grab a lot of territory quickly, and then you refactor and come out swinging in the late game. Some people can manage to go the whole game. Hi, Josh. Some people can go the whole game without crashing, and so that's kind of the. Sorry about that.
You don't have to be.
Yeah. He's my best friend. So they crash and they have to restart their government and start up again. The Woodland Alliance then is the people in the forest are the foxes, the rabbits, the mice, and we wanted it to be like the game. The art depicts there might be people loyal to the cats that aren't necessarily cats. So it's not just broken down around racial lines, and so the rabbits and the foxes and the mice are the inhabitants of the forest. They form the Woodland Alliance, and the Woodland Alliance starts with nothing on the board. And as the game goes on, they gather sympathy, and sympathy leads to areas of the board that it's hard for the other players to travel into. And eventually they rebel and destroy things and put bases down, and then they get troops on the board. And they're kind of guerrilla fighters. There's not as many warriors, but they fight better than the other groups. And then the last group is a single person called the Vagabond. There's three options. There's a thief raccoon, a tinker beaver, and a ranger wolf, and they're just in it for fame and fortune. So they sometimes they can help people, sometimes they can attack people. They do, like, somewhere during the game, they're probably going to end up clipping somebody's wings by attacking them because they're pretty destructive themselves, and they can also go questing and get cards and points for it. So you know, they're just kind of in the middle of all this. I like playing them because it's like if you're in a role-playing game where you're playing the character in a war-torn country, you get that experience, but the factions are actually like doing things and they're active in the world instead of just being menacing towards each other. So, and I like that interaction.
What I love about all this is there's just obviously an intense amount of theme in there, which the art already kind of like brings you in, but that's something that TI does really well of, like, every faction you're just so invested in their story, so it's more than just the strategy, but they kind of then all coalesce together. So there's two expansions, right? There's one that's already out, the Riverfolk expansion, but you guys have one upcoming. What is that? When is it available? And then I'm going to have a follow-up question after that.
Okay. So the Underworld expansion is coming out in it's arriving in a couple of months. It's at the printer right now. We've done all the wood and stuff. Now we just got to do the paper components. And what that is it adds a new map to the game. So it's another double-sided board. The original route comes with a double-sided board. And it adds a mountain pass map. So there's kind of a tight area you can fight over. If you control the center of it, you get an extra point every turn, which is unusual from all the other boards. And there's also paths through the mountains that you can cut during the game, so you can create new paths during the game. So it's kind of a vector map, and so you can create new vectors basically during the game. The other half then is a lake map, and so there's a giant lake in the center of the map, and the players can sail across it with a raft that they can take control of, and so there's those two. There's also two more factions. The Crows are like kind of a deep espionage state, and so they have guerrilla fighters on the board, and they are performing plots on the board to kind of trick the other players and confound the other players. The other faction then is the Great Underground Duchy, just the Underground Duchy. I call it the Great, but and they are military interventionists, and so they live in the earth, and then throughout the game they tunnel up and try and peacekeep a little bit on the surface. So, and then they with their influence with the tribes or the factions on the board can spend that to appoint lords to their parliament, and the lords give them extra actions or other point scoring opportunities. So there's also, in addition, there's more Vagabond options in there. Yep.
So for us, there's always been a debate of like, how did the chef intend all of this to work? You know, anytime an expansion comes out too, it's like, is the expansion required material? So for us, when we're coming into this game kind of blind, we've known a little bit, we haven't played it ourselves yet though, but we want to be able to give like the best strategy discussions for our fans. For you guys, what do you think is the best way to introduce yourself to Drute and get into it, and then when do you upgrade to those expansions? What's kind of like the best process, or is it one of those like get every expansion you can and the whole thing just works together at once?
So the strength of Root versus Vast is that, which is our previous title, is that there's enough generic rules at the center of it, like the warriors all fight the same, the warriors all move the same, that once you teach that core of how rulership of a clearing works, how movement works, how combat works, a lot of people can look. You can take the verbs from that and look at your player board and figure out what you do. So I would sit down and make sure the group has a strong. That's how I teach it. I make sure people. I'm like, this is what ruling means. This is what moving means. This is what combat means. I would let people draft the role that they want to be. I would just play with the base set out of the box, and let people play 2 or 3 games of the same role. Don't be in a hurry to switch roles, because as you get more into your role, you also learn what you have to do in the late game to kind of hedge the other player's bets for winning. And I think Twilight Imperium has a little bit of that. Like certain groups are so polarized, different than the other ones, that you kind of have to learn how to implement your late game. And Root definitely has that you have to learn how to score the big 10 points at the end of the game to win the game. Because anyway, whoever's first to 30 wins the game. So that's how I'd recommend doing it. And then I would mix in the factions. If you want to play 5-player with that approach, I would suggest getting the Riverfolk expansion, which adds the otters on. And I think the otters are a nice fit for the 5th player because they trade and facilitate the other players. And they speed up the game a little bit in that process, or they make the gameplay a little bit smoother for everyone in that process. And so again, just sticking to those same roles a few times, and then slowly add in the rest of the material. So the maps are a nice add too, because the maps change the flow of the game, but they don't change the rules. Right. Yeah,
because that's a big thing for us too, is having to know which pieces to segment out. I mean, the map changes every single time in TI, so we can't even dig into that. But the idea of let's learn the base, and then we can then apply any of that to any map we play on or any faction we play on. So getting into that like late game stuff you talk about, end game route, or like high level play, what are things you've seen done in Root that by players that maybe you didn't expect, or nobody planned for, or just like those top level plays where you're like the best victory you've ever seen? We're interested in what is Root capable of.
Right. So there's been a few people who have pulled off a win with 15 or more points in one round. I'm among them. And and so there's this moment where you just kind of have to, like you plan for it and then you tip the apple cart and suddenly everyone's like, oh no, you just did it. And those have been kind of fun moments for me. There's a card in the original set called I forgot to talk about this. In the last expansion, there's also a deck called the Exiles and Partisans, which replaces the base game's deck with new stuff to build, and it completely replaces it. But in the initial deck, there's these cards called the favor cards, and it's like favor of the foxes, favor of the rabbits, favor of the mice. And if you construct one, you wipe out every enemy piece in clearings of that color. And so planning around that, I think, is a surprise to a lot of people, because people are horrified when it goes off, and I'm always like, well, things get lost in a war game. It's okay. You have the capability of coming back into the game. You just have to figure out how to stage your comeback. But I've also spent entire games as the Riverfolk just preventing the other players from being able to build it, because it's telegraphed. You can see what they need to do to build it, and so you kind of have to watch those things. And people will be like, "Why are you picking on me?" And I'm like, "Well, because you just got your 3rd red crafting, and I'm worried you have the favor card." So, and the otter player can't hold on to their own cards because they sell their cards. So. Those are the sorts of surprises I've been seeing is that sort of like that sort of management, like managing the other player's arc to victory is more important than building your own arc to victory.
That's a super interesting nugget there to do, because it's something that gets at, I think, all of our personal favorite types of games, which in strategy, it's the idea that you could come back at any moment. You can fall behind in some ways, but come back around. Do you think Root has good comeback mechanics that encourage kind of like it's always a race to the finish line and nothing else?
I think so, and not. I mean, there's very few guardrails in the game, which is kind of Cole's philosophy about design. Is if you fall off course, then that's on you to figure out how to get back on course. But I mean, even with the interaction in a 3 or 4 player game between the players, eventually the two heavy players are going to start hitting each other again, and then that gives you a moment. Well, no one's paying attention to you to get back into the game, and so just the meta of how that's played, I think, works pretty well in its favor. So yeah.
Patrick's got a TI bit, and we need to. Yeah.
I'm old. That's gonna be edited, right? So, all right. So I used to back in the I suppose late '90s. I interned for Jeff Tidball, who works at Atlas Games now. Yeah. And Jeff, it's weird because Jeff and I went to school together and are the same age, and so I interned for Jeff. And at the time, Atlas Games and a young company called Fantasy Flight shared an office together. And Fantasy Flight at the time was a comic book distributor, I believe a comic book distributor for European comics in the U.S. or South American, I don't know which. And so they had half the warehouse with Atlas Games, who had the other half of the warehouse, in this commercial space they had together. Anyway, so I remember back then Christian Peterson being on the phone, calling banks, and looking for the seed capital he needed to produce Twilight Imperium First Edition. And he finally hit pay dirt, I believe, this is what I remember, with a community bank, like a farm community bank in one of the small towns in Minnesota, was willing to loan him the money he needed to get started with Twilight Imperium 1. And he had a very clear vision of what he was going to make, because those expansions were right on top of, I mean, they were advertised in the initial box set. And so produced all that, sold it, and the rest is history.
So what you're saying is the butterfly effect is if you hadn't held the door for Christian Peterson that one time, that's when he would have gotten hit by the car. We wouldn't have TI. We wouldn't have this podcast, and we wouldn't be here at all. So it's all. Patrick, thank you so much. It's all thanks to you.
No problem at all. I mean, now I have to think what the other butterfly effect is. Maybe I did hurt somebody else. No.
Well, Patrick, thank you so much for joining us, and we can't wait to play Root and start digging in very, very deeply into it. So thank you so much.
Yeah. And the Underworld Expansion will be shipping soon. It might be in stores by the end of the year.
Perfect. Sounds good. Thank you so much.
All right, welcome to it's not the errata part because we don't have anything to errata. I always like when I get to bring us back in from a break or whatever. I hope you guys enjoyed both of the interviews. They were really fun to do, and it was kind of amazing that people were willing to talk to us. I don't know. I was like blown away that we even got interviews.
It's a new experience for us of like being taken a little bit seriously in these like public spheres of board gaming where it's fun.
Yeah, it's nice, and I wanna just kind of do some thank yous because GenCon was such an amazing experience. I definitely want to thank everyone that came to the live show.
For sure,
there was probably about 30 some odd people. There were some space kitties there. Every single one of you that came out to that show, thank you so much. And everyone that listened to the live show last week, it was so much fun to do. It was such a crazy experiment for us, and it's pretty wild. I think that it even went as well as it did.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to listen to it because it like kind of gives me anxiety to listen to it.
Yeah.
But I listened to some of it and was just like, wow, this is really special that we were able to do this. And everybody that we like played games with at GenCon, everyone that like was willing to like say hi, and like there were so many people from the Discord hanging out. And all of our crew, like EJ, Paul, Steven.
Yeah.
I want to thank Root. We got to thank Root a lot.
Like huge
Root,
thanks.
Root really, like if you guys thought Root, well, actually, never mind. Root helping out on the tournament was a huge effort that
Right.
he'll probably never be able to top because that was just like an insane thing to do with us.
Yeah.
But this was close. This was
was
a
up
lot
there.
too.
Well, I just love having him as a part of our team because he gels with all of our. I mean, Gen Con is a lot of us just bringing our dumb friends to this thing that they kind of enjoy, and Alec like gelled in with that perfectly, like right away, and he gels in with all the other stuff we do. It's just always really refreshing to have somebody else there that's like clicking into all your same ideas.
Yes.
And what he set up for the live show was like kind of perfectly what we were hoping to get out of it. So I'm just really proud of him and happy to have had him with us.
Yeah. Everybody that was in the freaking Twilight Imperium tournament, and also, quick update real quick, Matt, where's my video? Here we go.
Well,
video watch 2.
By the time this
now.
is released, boy, the hope is that it's actually up. I'm looking right now at the export, and it says 1 hour remaining. That has fooled me before, so I make no promises. But the goal is for it to be out any day now or already out, and that will be of course, the like live to tape version, basically, like unedited, just what we were able to capture in the moment. And then we have all the footage kind of backed up that we might be able to then turn into something more condensed. But I just wanted to get this sort of like nonstop. It's going to be the entire game from start to finish.
Right.
Nothing cut out.
Right.
But
it is like a live edit. Like you are seeing
Yes.
just like one angle at a time, and Matt was basically like picking the angle as we were commentating.
It was a really huge setup that I'm incredibly proud of, that EJ and I were able to like kind of figure it all out. We've been working on it for months and just super stoked that it worked the way we wanted it to.
So there you have it. Definitely getting it in several days, really.
Yeah, hopefully.
Like,
I mean, again, the
you
goal is that it's
you've probably already gotten it, and you're watching it, loving it, or whatever.
Boy, I hope so.
I hope it's not all messed up. And janky.
I hate video editing. Let's get out of this nightmare scenario of me thinking about what could go wrong, because it's what I've been doing for a week.
Oh wait, I also want to thank EJ.
Yeah.
We need to thank EJ.
We really
especially need to thank EJ because he brought a lot of equipment.
Yeah.
It was a combination of our equipment that we've gotten through the Patreon, and then EJ's equipment married together into the wildest setup to film Twilight Imperium game. Also, I want to thank Blark Knob.
For hosting the tournament, for sure.
Yeah. Always got to thank Blark Knob. Also, I want to thank Patrick, who moderated
the
like kind of like
game.
he moderated like the first half of it, and then Knob Daddy takes over halfway through because Knob Daddy was like knobbing some other thing. But yeah, let's
He's got his knobs and everything, doesn't he?
yeah, he's
At
got
Gen
his
Con.
knobs. He's got his knob at Gen Knob. Oh my god.
dear.
At KnobCon. Everybody's got to go to KnobCon this year.
I'm ready
dude.
for that. Yeah,
KnobCon's
KnobCon
like
2020.
Yeah, that's the best deal. Thank you, Stephen Wilbur. Thank you, Jessica Linverdi.
Well, if you want to help thank all those people, you should thank them on iTunes by rating us and rating them. Give us a rating on Apple Podcasts and everything. You can find us on Twitter at SpaceCatsPod, Facebook, Space Cats Peace Turtles. You can find our posts every week on the Twilight Imperium subreddit. You can join our Patreon to help us do events like Gen Con. All the money goes back into the show and getting equipment and helping us do trips where we can do all sorts of crazy stuff, like hopefully the Gen Con video that is now out. You can also join our Discord to join in on conversation. We talk strategy and we talk theme, and we also just really screw around a lot on the Discord. And
Yeah. What a wild week we had.
What a weird week. I'm really ready for the next one. Every year we learn more about Gen Con, and I'm just super pumped that to know that this year went so much better than last year, and I can only assume and hope that next year will go better than this year, which is saying something.
Yeah.
So I'm really pumped to keep doing this.
It will, because next year I'm going by myself.
No! I'm not invited?
No, it's just me and Root. And I mean the board game. All right, well, bye-bye. I'm tired, and I've been really sick.
Thank you for listening to Space Cats Peace Turtles, and thanks to Ben Prunty for the use of his music. You can find more at benpruntymusic.com and benprunty.bandcamp.com. Pax Magnifica, Bellum Gloriosum.